Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Bharat Ratna. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Pakistan Army Chief calls for stable hands, healing touch, as election results show no clear winner. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu orders army to prepare to evacuate hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza's Rafah. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar starts day 2 of the 7th Indian Ocean Conference with a discussion with his Australian counterpart. Indian Cricket Board announces the squad for the remaining 3 tests against England. Virat Kohli to miss rest of series. Akashdeep earns his maiden test call-up for India. And news from Pakistan as the country faces days of political horse trading after the election results released early Saturday showed no clear majority. With independent candidates mostly backed by jailed ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan's PTI winning 92 seats and no party securing a majority, Pakistan seemed poised for a hung parliament. To form a government, 133 seats in the National Assembly are needed. Leaving no stone unturned is also the former PM Nawaz Sharif, who has urged all parties to form a unity government to stabilize Pakistan.
आज हमें जो मैंडेट मिला है, जरूरी है कि दूसरी पार्टियां बैठकर मिलकर एक हुकूमत कायम करें और पाकिस्तान को इस भंवर से निकालें.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's army chief also congratulated the country on Saturday for the successful conduct of its national election and said nation needed stable hands to move on from the politics of anarchy and polarization. Amid the Election Commission of Pakistan drawing flack over the delay in declaration of the results of the general elections, former PM and Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf PTI founder Imran Khan released a victory speech in his AI-enabled voice, saying that Nawaz Sharif failed with the massive turnout of voters on polling day.
My fellow Pakistanis, yesterday you laid the foundation for Hakiki Azadi, true freedom, with your votes. I congratulate each and every one of you for winning the 2024 election. I had complete faith in you that you would come out and vote. Now, nothing can hinder our progress. Despite 2 years of injustice and atrocities, we have won the 2024 election with a 2/3 majority. Everyone has witnessed the power of your vote.
Amidst the turmoil, the United States, Britain and the European Union on Friday separately expressed concerns about Pakistan's electoral process and urged a probe into reported irregularities. The US and the EU both mentioned allegations of interference, including arrests of activists, and added that the claims of irregularities, interference and fraud should be fully investigated. While the EU statement noted a lack of level playing field, attributing that to the inability of some political actors to contest the elections and to restrictions to freedom of assembly, freedom of expression and internet access. The EU, the US and Britain said that they would work with the next government and did not congratulate any candidate or party. Well, the Israeli military is coming up with a plan that would not only defeat Hamas, but would also help in evacuating civilians in Gaza. Now, security establishment in Israel is asked to submit to the cabinet a combined plan for evacuating the population and destroying the battalions. Over 1 million Palestinians have sought refuge in the city near the Egyptian border, prompting escalating tensions in the region. The development has prompted concern from the US. DD India's Sally Patterson tells us more.
In a televised address, US President Joe Biden says Israel's actions in Gaza had been over the top. He said, quote, "A lot of innocent people are in trouble and they're dying and it's got to stop." The president's comments are being seen as his sharpest criticism so far of Israel since the war broke out. Separately, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said the United States would not support a major Israeli military operation in Rafah under current conditions. Just hours later, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he ordered the military to prepare a plan to evacuate civilians from Rafah ahead of an expected Israeli invasion. Israel says that after more than 4 months of war, the city is the last remaining Hamas stronghold in Gaza. Figures released by the Strip's health ministry on Friday show at least 27,000 people have been killed in Gaza since fighting began on October 7th. Meanwhile, families of hostages still being held in Gaza are demanding the release of their loved ones as the fighting rages on. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
And news from Russia, Ukraine conflict now. A Russian drone strike hit Ukraine's northeastern city of Kharkiv late night on Friday. A fire broke out at a petrol station due to the strike that also damaged civilian infrastructures. According to the regional governor, 7 civilians were killed in the strike. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a major decision to dismiss the commander-in-chief Valery Zaluzhny as the country faces challenges from Russia. This move marks one of the largest shakeups in Ukraine's leadership. Former head of Ukraine's ground forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, has taken over. Zelensky emphasized the urgency for change as Kiev's troops failed to make significant territorial gains in the recent counter-offensive against Russia, now entering its 3rd year. DD India's Megumi Lim has more from Kiev.
Well, the replacement of Ukraine's top commander Valery Zaluzhny does not come as a surprise. Reports had already emerged last week that Zelensky had requested for the commander to step down, but he had refused to do so at the time. He has now been replaced by the former head of Ukraine's ground forces, Oleksandr Syrsky. Zelensky explained in his video address to the nation that urgent changes were needed after Ukraine had failed to meet its goals in last year's counteroffensive, and that the stagnation on the front lines had affected the public mood. Syrsky is close to Zelensky and has been credited by the president for leading the Battle of Kiev, where Russian forces were repelled from marching on the capital during the early days of the full-scale war, and for leading the surprise counteroffensive in the Kharkiv region, where swaths of territories were liberated in September of 2022. But the shakeup does come at a precarious time for Ukraine, and it is unclear whether the leadership change will improve conditions on the battlefield. Kiev's troops are facing a critical shortage of ammunition, especially artillery shells, as additional military aid from the U.S. has been stalled for months. They're also facing a shortage of soldiers on the ground as Russia gains an upper hand on the front lines. Syrsky outlined his plans for the war shortly after his appointment, which included the clear and detailed planning of military administration bodies and the fastest and most rational distribution of equipment and arms to the front lines, objectives that Zelensky has said were priorities for this year. Syrsky is also expected to announce a new leadership team of Ukraine's armed forces in the coming days. Megumi Lim in Kiev, reporting for DD India.
And US President Joe Biden and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met at the White House amidst efforts to secure support for Ukraine. As European governments express mounting concern over the delay in US lawmakers approving new aid for Kiev's battle against Russia, DD India's Nick Harper presents more insights from Washington.
Well, plenty for the two leaders to discuss here in Washington, D.C. The war in Ukraine, efforts to strengthen the NATO alliance and the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. It was the 6th time that these two men have met as the leaders of their countries, and much of the discussions this Friday revolved around Ukraine and its impact on NATO. Because the US Senate this week failed to pass a bill that would have provided around $60 billion in aid to Ukraine. Republicans in the House of Representatives, who would have voted on the proposal next, had already signalled that they were going to stand in opposition to this bill. So it means that new military assistance and financial aid to Kiev remains in limbo, and that is worrying many US allies in Europe. Now, the two leaders didn't hold a press conference, but before they got into their discussions, they said very much that they hoped that Republicans would be able to stop their opposition to funding new assistance to Kiev.
Congress, we have to pass a national security spending package now. Our House members are being somewhat reluctant, and hopefully it's more politics than real. But including funding for Ukraine, and to help them continue to be able to defend themselves against the brutal aggression of Russia.
Germany's now the second largest provider of money to Ukraine after the United States. And earlier on Friday, Schulz met with US senators, after which he said that he was confident that a decision on further military aid for Ukraine would be made soon.
Germany was ready to increase its support with weapon delivery. And hopefully the Congress, the House will follow you and make a decision on giving the necessary support, because without the support of the United States and without the support of the European states, Ukraine will have not a chance to defend its own country.
However, there are also lingering concerns about the US's relationship with NATO if Biden does not win a second term in November's presidential election. Former President Donald Trump, Biden's likely challenger, has threatened to withdraw military and financial aid to Ukraine in its fight against Russia, and he's also questioned whether the US should even be part of the Western military alliance. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
And India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, started the day 2 of the 7th Indian Ocean Conference with a discussion with his Australian counterpart. Jaishankar attended a fireside chat with his friend Penny Wong. Leaders discussed ties between two countries, Indian Ocean architecture, and also shared interests in the Indo-Pacific.
In history, people from the Pacific Islands who would actually probably the greatest navigators of their times, who would come deep into the Indian Ocean. You know, there are communities in Madagascar, Arabs who sailed from the Gulf to China. You had Indians. I mean, if you look at Indian cultural footprint, both sides, I mean, all the way to East Africa on the one side, Southeast Africa, to the Fujian coast in China.
He also lauded the relations between India, Australia, US and Japan.
This is an Indian perspective. It also reflects three very important relationships with Australia, with the US, with Japan, which have transformed after the end of the Cold War. So if you look at the big picture change and then these three key relationships, three bilateral relationships changing, then they kind of come together today to really create the plot.
And post-discussion with FM Wong, Jaishankar visited Salani Avenue in Perth. The avenue is named after Nain Singh Salani, an Indian origin soldier honoured in Australia. The minister also met some of Indian veterans and community leaders there. On the sidelines of the 7th Indian Ocean Conference in Perth, EAM Jaishankar held meetings with his counterparts from the attending countries. He started Saturday with a meeting with Madagascar counterpart Rasata Rafah Vitafeka. The two leaders discussed bilateral relations that we hope to deepen. Earlier on Friday, Jaishankar called on Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe. The two leaders recognized the progress in the bilateral cooperation and resolved to continue deepening them. The External Affairs Minister also held a good conversation with his Singaporean counterpart, Vivian Balakrishnan. The leaders noted the progress in a strategic partnership and exchanged views on regional and global issues. Ahead of the conference in Perth, EAM Jaishankar met with his Australian counterpart Penny Wong. Both the leaders had good exchange on comprehensive strategic partnership and convergence on matters related to the Indian Ocean. They also discussed the Indo-Pacific situation in West Asia and other regional and global topics. Let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. A plane missing a tire lands successfully in Brazil airport. The plane, which departed from Rio de Janeiro's airport with the destination to Sao Paulo's Congonhas, got diverted after the inboard and outboard left main wheels were unspotted. The landing was a safe one and the pilots drove the aircraft onto the runway, flanked by emergency vehicles. A 4-man crew, including Turkey's first astronaut, returns to Earth after a 2-week visit to the International Space Station. The space mission, arranged entirely by a commercial expense by Texas-based startup Axiom Space. The spacecraft carrying the Axiom Mission 3 crew landed at sea near Florida and was then dragged to a recovery vessel where the team were assisted out of the capsule. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Addressing the 8th edition of Global Business Summit 2024, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said every development expert group in the world is discussing India's transformation journey in the last 10 years. Indian tourists can now purchase tickets for Eiffel Tower via UPI. And Jordan to lock horns with defending champion Qatar in the final of the AFC Asian Cup.
A string of Bharat Ratnas to people who contributed their best in the progress of the nation and were still somewhere considered unrecognized or perhaps ignored.
It wouldn't be an overstatement to say that there is only one national party in India. If you look at the Congress, the last 3 months they have been on a self-destructive mode.
Rahul Gandhi is enumerating the number of bureaucrats who are OBCs. It remains to be seen how Congress party's double standard on OBC reservation and the whole matter will be seen by the larger public.
I can quote a number of opposition leaders, including Omar Abdullah, and all these people have started saying, let's look toward 29-29.
You're watching DD India Live. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. President of India Draupadi Murmu addressed at the inaugural ceremony of Adi Mahotsav 2024, an annual national tribal festival at Major Dhyan Chand Stadium in the national capital. It will showcase diversity of India's tribal heritage till 18th of February.
आज यहाँ मुझे विभिन्न राज्यों की जनजातीय संस्कृति और विरासत का एक अनूठा संगम देखने को मिला है। उनकी बोली, भाषा, शिल्प, खान-पान, संगीत और पारंपरिक कला भारत की सांस्कृतिक विरासत का जीवंत उदाहरण है। हमारा जनजातीय समुदाय आधुनिक विकास के लाभों से वंचित रहे, ये उचित नहीं है। देश के समग्र विकास में उनके योगदान की महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही है और भविष्य में भी रहेगी।
Today is the last day of the budget session of the Indian Parliament. The lower house began with a discussion on the construction of the Ram Temple in Ayodhya. Senior BJP leader Satyapal Singh initiated the discussion on the construction of the Ram Temple in Ayodhya and the consecration ceremony of Ram Lala. Upper house held short discussion on white paper. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also expected to address the house as the final parliament session before the Lok Sabha election concludes today. The budget session of Parliament is scheduled to conclude today. The Bharatiya Janata Party presented the Ram Temple resolution in the lower house of the Parliament. BJP MP Satyapal Singh, who initiated the discussion on the Ram Temple, said that it is historic to witness the Pran Pratishtha in Ayodhya. India's Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Thakur said that the Ram Mandir was, is and will always be the center of faith.
राम मंदिर तो हमारे लिए आस्था का केंद्र था भी है और सदा रहेगा भी। लेकिन वो लोग जो प्रश्न चिन्ह उठाते थे कि बीजेपी वाले कहते हैं रामलला हम आएंगे, मंदिर वहीं बनाएंगे, लेकिन तारीख नहीं बताएंगे। हमने तारीख बताई भी, राम मंदिर का निर्माण किया भी और जनता ने पूरे देश भर में राममय वातावरण हो भी गया है। और ये नमो हैट्रिक यही बताती है कि आएंगे तो मोदी ही।
Well, a day after India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced Bharat Ratna, highest civilian award for former Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao and Chaudhry Charan Singh, and father of Green Revolution Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, Union Minister Piyush Goyal said that it's a moment of pride that PM Modi gave respect to Chaudhry Charan Singh by awarding him the Bharat Ratna.
सबके लिए इतनी गर्व की बात है कि माननीय चौधरी चरण सिंह जी को प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने सही सम्मान दिया, भारत रत्न दिया। चाहे चौधरी चरण सिंह जी को भारत रत्न देने की बात हो, श्री नरसिम्हा राव जी को भारत रत्न देने की बात हो, डॉक्टर MS स्वामीनाथन को भारत रत्न देने की बात हो, ये तो पूरे देश को उल्लास और गर्व के साथ इसको सेलिब्रेट करना चाहिए।
And India's Union Home Minister Amit Shah on Saturday announced that Citizenship Amendment Act 2019 will be notified and implemented before the upcoming Lok Sabha elections. He said while speaking at the ET Now Global Business Summit.
CAA देश का कानून है, इसका नोटिफिकेशन निश्चित रूप से हो जाएगा। चुनाव के पहले ही CAA को अमल में आना है, इसमें किसी को कंफ्यूजन रखना नहीं है। ये भी कांग्रेस पार्टी के नेताओं का वादा है। जब देश का विभाजन किया और वहां पर ढेर सारे वहां की देश में अल्पसंख्यक जो थे, हिंदू, बौद्ध, जैन, क्रिश्चियन थे, उन पर प्रताड़ना होती थी, सारे लोग यहां भाग कर आना चाहते थे। उस वक्त कांग्रेस पार्टी का वादा था कि आप धीरे धीरे आइए, आप जब भी आओगे भारत में आपका स्वागत है, आपको नागरिकता दी जाएगी।
The Principal Secretary to India's PM, Pramod Kumar Mishra, while addressing an event in Sambalpur in Indian state of Odisha, spoke about economic growth.
We are now striving for becoming a developed country by 2047, the Viksit Bharat, and we need to achieve a high growth trajectory, not only a high growth trajectory, but the growth should be sustainable, because high growth which is not sustainable is not meaningful. Hence, the type of approach we follow today, the type of strategy we adopt are extremely relevant for the next 2.5 decades.
The 51st edition of the New Delhi World Book Fair begins today, featuring over 2,000 stalls with books in multiple languages. Week-long fair at Bharat Mandapam also marks the inauguration of a national e-library where books can be accessed and downloaded for free. Applauding India's growth, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that every development expert group in the world is discussing India's transformation journey in the last 10 years. He was addressing the 8th edition of Global Business Summit 2024 held in New Delhi on Friday. The summit was themes on disruption, development and diversification.
The Times Global Business Summit aimed to address major issues like world politics, economy and diplomacy. While addressing the largest business conference in Asia, PM Modi declared it as India's moment, comparing Davos to a business-oriented Kumbh Mela and stressed on the growing trust towards India in the world.
इस बार समिट की जो थीम रखी है, मैं समझता हूं वो थीम इटसेल्फ बहुत अहम है। डिसरप्शन, डेवलपमेंट और डाइवर्सिफिकेशन। आज के इस दौर में ये बहुत ही चर्चित शब्द है और डिसरप्शन, डेवलपमेंट एंड डाइवर्सिफिकेशन की इस चर्चा में कोई इस बात पर सहमत है कि भारत का समय है। This is India's time.
Focusing on India's developmental journey, PM Modi also said that there comes a time when all the circumstances are in the favor of the country. He said that it is during this time when the country makes itself strong for centuries to come.
ये टाइम पीरियड, ये कालखंड वाकई अभूतपूर्व है। एक प्रकार से वर्चुअस साइकिल शुरू हुई है। ये वो समय है जब हमारी ग्रोथ रेट लगातार बढ़ रही है और हमारा फिस्कल डेफिसिट घट रहा है।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi asserted that India is on the path to becoming the third largest economy in the world. He also expressed confidence that the present government's third term will witness huge decisions, and preparations are already underway for new schemes to eliminate poverty while giving a new impetus to India's development.
हमारे तीसरे टर्म में देश इकोनॉमी में दुनिया में नंबर 3 तक पहुंच जाएगा। तीसरे टर्म में और भी बड़े फैसले होने जा रहे हैं। भारत की गरीबी दूर करने, भारत के विकास को नई गति देने के लिए हमने नई योजनाओं की तैयारी पिछले 1.5 साल से मैं कर रहा हूं और बहुत एक दिशा में कैसे काम करूंगा, कहां ले जाऊंगा, इसका पूरा रोड मैप मैं बना रहा हूं।
Praising India's governance model, Prime Minister also said that it is moving forward on 2 streams simultaneously. He emphasized that on one hand, the challenges of the 20th century are being addressed, while on the other hand, the government is striving to fulfill the aspirations of the 21st century.
On to sports now. India's batsman Virat Kohli has been ruled out of the remaining 3 tests of the 5-match home series with England due to personal reasons, while pacer Akashdeep has earned his maiden test call-up for India as the BCCI announced India's squad for the remaining tests against England. Kohli did not play in the first 2 tests. Batter Shreyas Iyer has also been dropped due to injury. All-rounder Ravindra Jadeja and wicketkeeper batter KL Rahul, who had missed the second test due to injuries, have been included in the squad but will play subject to fitness clearance. The third test will be held in Rajkot from February 15 with matches to follow at Ranchi and Dharamshala. England won the opening test before the hosts leveled the series at 1-1. And Jordan will lock horns with defending champions Qatar in the final of the AFC Asian Cup, which will take place at Lusail Stadium in Qatar. Surprise package, Jordan finished 3rd in their group and scrapped through to the knockout stage, where they suddenly elevated their game to beat heavyweights Iraq and South Korea. Qatar turned things around in the Asian Cup, scoring in every game en route to the final, including a thrilling 3-2 semi-final win over higher-ranked Iran. While Jordan will play with nothing to lose in their first final, hosts Qatar are the defending champions after winning their maiden title in 2019. All right, that's all for this edition of DD India Live. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.